Hello, my name is Kit Cabello, and I'm one of the main hosts of Hard Lens Media and also of Chicago Corner. The purpose of this video is a discussion of Tulsi Gabbard, her campaign, and the conflict between progressive media outlets. We know both organizations that are basically in a conflict right now, and that's TYT with Anna Kasparian, as well as Mi Casa Su Casa, Niko House. To clear the record, we know the Young Turks due to the fact that myself and Daniel and Paul are former members of TYT Chicago and Wolfpack Illinois. Our time with those two organizations, we managed to get SJR 42 passed in the Illinois State Senate and House, thus making Illinois the third state to call for an Article 5 convention to get money out of politics. Plus, when we were with TYT Chicago, we managed to get Cenk Uygur and Anna Kasparian to come to Chicago to visit the members of TYT Chicago. Since then, myself and Daniel have appeared twice on TYT, being interviewed by Cenk Uygur, who is the main host of the Young Turks. Our relationship with Niko House, he is a progressive independent reporter like us, and he has been collaborating with us on a few projects earlier on before we started doing our live stream show. Plus, he's been giving us advice on how to really build our network and how we can really reach out to progressives and independents. This is a very difficult story to talk about because we feel that this conflict between progressives is counterintuitive to the main goal, which is to create a better future and to really have strong progressive candidates on the American political landscape. What I will be discussing is something that myself and my team have been going over in regards to the timeline that really led up to this conflict between progressive independent media outlets over Tulsi Gabbard. On March 24th, Anna Kasparian, one of the main hosts and showrunners of the Young Turks, stated that Tulsi Gabbard is not a progressive.
I'm sorry, FXS7 says, Tulsi Gabbard is a progressive. I don't hear TYT ever mentioning her.
She's not a progressive.
No, that's not fair.
On foreign policy issues, she's not a progressive, but...
No, that's also not fair. Look, and you see that? We have disagreements.
We do have disagreements.
Okay.
From that video, a lot of progressives and independents were upset with Anna Kasparian making the statement that Tulsi Gabbard is not a progressive on domestic and foreign policy issues. Even Cenk Uygur was taken back by that statement. It should be noted that that video that was played earlier took place on March 24th of 2019. And it was stated also on that same day on Twitter, Anna Kasparian did state that the Gabbard campaign has not accepted the invite to the Young Turks, even though it has been stated by other progressive independent media networks and the campaign that they are coordinating with all of them to have Tulsi Gabbard on their shows respectively. Now, the main tweet from Anna Kasparian that really started this conflict between her and Niko was when she basically stated that Niko House received a lot of compliments from Tulsi Gabbard and that he's basically turning a blind eye to anything in regards to be critical towards Tulsi Gabbard. Now, in this next tweet, Anna Kasparian mentions that Tulsi Gabbard is hawkish in regards towards terrorism and extremism, but a lot of progressives took issue with this tweet because Tulsi Gabbard's main policy is for the United States to get out of foreign wars and for us to really address the military-industrial complex. And a lot of progressive independent media networks, like Niko House, have been in full support of these policies. Now, from these tweets, Niko House challenged Anna Kasparian to a debate and posted that video on his YouTube channel.
They've done plenty of stories about Elizabeth Warren, and in fact, both Emma Vigilant, who also decided to open her mouth, and Anna talk about the fact that they consider Elizabeth Warren progressive, which is interesting to me. Because Elizabeth Warren is a progressive, right? She literally touted on TYT boldly, I'm going to accept a lot of money from corporations. I want all the money, all of it, PAC money, corporate money, industry. She wants all of it in the general election, right? We know Elizabeth Warren is a progressive. She's a hawk on Venezuela. Anna doesn't have a problem with that though, right? Of course. She's a hawk on Syria. Anna doesn't have a problem with that though, of course. But Anna has disdain for Tulsi Gabbard but loves Elizabeth Warren. How much rational sense does that make? How can you dare say that Tulsi Gabbard, who doesn't take any corporate money, who damn near has an identical domestic platform as Bernie, but is even better in some aspects than Bernie on domestic policies and is better than everyone bar none on foreign policy? And so, of course, I challenge Anna, because I'm not into the bickering back and forth. I don't have time to debate on Twitter so you can just try to gas yourself up. I don't have time for that. Either you want to debate or you don't. But if you don't want to debate me, Anna, then don't tag me again.
Now that video was played on the same day another video came out from Anna Kasparian, and that was her no filter video in regards to covering Tulsi Gabbard and her policies and whether or not she is a progressive on certain issues.
Tulsi Gabbard is one of the more exciting Democratic candidates for the 2020 presidential election. She's young, dynamic, and overall unconventional, which is something voters still seem to desire following the last general election. A few issues came up that I think are worth exploring. This is not a takedown or a hit piece on Tulsi. I still think she's a fascinating candidate. I still think she has several attributes that place her above many of the other Democrats running. But it would be misleading and unfair to my audience if I pretended there weren't some concerns for progressives. Tulsi was also extremely critical of Obama's refusal to use the phrase radical Islamic terrorism, which was a common criticism coming from the right wing. According to a source who spoke to The Hill, Bannon loves Tulsi Gabbard, loves her, wants to work with her on everything. She would fit perfectly, too, inside the administration. There were other foreign policy issues Tulsi agreed with Republicans on. She wouldn't have approached the Iran nuclear deal from the framework of diplomacy. A photo from the event shows Gabbard posing with avid Trump supporters Rabbi Shmuley and Miriam Adelson, the wife of Sheldon. Now, keep in mind, though, Miriam Adelson is the type of person who's been very vicious against Palestinians and even considers them a made-up people. While these foreign policy concerns are legitimate, I want to end this segment by noting that there are some great progressive policies that Tulsi supports. She's a fighter for Medicare for all, supports a $15 minimum wage, and understands the severity and urgency of climate change. Her camp has been in touch with TYT to schedule a possible interview, and I look forward to chatting with her about the issues I raised in this segment.
Anna felt she was being attacked from progressives for mentioning Tulsi's past. From this, there was a backlash from progressives who felt they were not being heard when they were being critical of Anna's statement that Tulsi Gabbard was not a progressive. On March 26, Niko House, the host of Mi Casa Su Casa, did a response video to Anna Kasparian's no filter video on Tulsi Gabbard.
Many of you are well aware by now that I challenged Anna Kasparian on her views on Tulsi Gabbard. Now, this challenge wasn't actually issued out of malice as much as it was out of concern for the unity and the progression of the progressive movement as a whole. As most of you know, I'm big on making sure that if we are going to critique our allies, we must critique them as such, while remembering that if we try and use disparaging smear tactics in order to critique our allies, the very same smear tactics that come from the neoliberals and the neoconservatives, then we are no better than them. And in fact, we are equipping them with the ammo to take down the left and more specifically, the progressive movement. They did finally decide to invite Tulsi Gabbard onto their show. The problem with, well, the entire video is that she frames it as if she's been a long supporter of Tulsi Gabbard and that she currently considers Gabbard a supporter despite a few minor progressive critiques. However, that's not the case. By Anna's own admission, she does not consider Tulsi Gabbard a progressive, and her tone alone, well, reveals how biased she actually is.
I'm sorry, FXS7 says, Tulsi Gabbard is a progressive. I don't hear TYT ever mentioning her.
She's not a progressive.
No, that's not fair.
On foreign policy issues, she's not a progressive, but...
Now, she starts off by saying, I want to be upfront about my own biases. And even though she goes on to talk about how much she supposedly used to like Tulsi Gabbard, like I said, the previous video clip actually reveals her biases.
The day after, Niko House made preparations to fly out to California to work on a collaboration interview with Tulsi Gabbard with the host of the CONVO COUCH. Representative Tulsi Gabbard appeared on 4 different progressive independent shows, starting off with Kim Iversen, then with Niko House / the CONVO COUCH, then on the Dore show, and then finally interviewed by Cenk Uygur on the Young Turks.
Hope to give Tulsi the space to answer some of these tough questions that many people have not allowed her to answer. So I do want to start off with something that's most recent, the Golan Heights situation with Trump and Syria and Israel, and this whole thing is, seems to be clearly, there's something more nefarious going on behind the background. But I know that one of the things that you most for is international sovereignty and making sure that we adhere to international law. So like, can you tell us how you feel about the Golan Heights situation, and then conversely how you feel about Israel's role in the Palestinian conflict and this Golan Heights, and constantly seeming to be a kind of like I don't want to say a propaganda arm, is a military arm for the U.S. instead of being an actual ally by keeping us out of these type of wars and these situations.
Is there a leader you would not meet with?
No. No, and here's why. If we are serious about the pursuit of peace and security, we have to be willing to take those meetings, to have those tough conversations.
And I want to show, what did you think when you saw this, Tulsi? This is the NBC News says the Russian propaganda machine that tried to influence the 2016 U.S. election is now promoting the presidential aspirations of 2020 candidate Tulsi Gabbard. Now, what they don't tell you, now you knew this when you saw this, that this was based on a discredited firm and a discredited report, right?
Yes, I did. And the interesting thing is, we knew that they were going to put out the article. It was supposed to come out sooner, but instead they chose to release that article just a couple hours before our campaign had our official kickoff event in Hawaii.
So Tulsi, you're running for president,
yes.
And we've got a lot of folks running for president, and so there's a little bit of a competition for who is more progressive, which is a great thing, which is a wonderful thing.
What a change, huh?
Yeah, now some are not in that competition. Some, like Senator Klobuchar, say, no thanks, right? She's running as a moderate, as a centrist, and everybody's got their own lanes, right? First of all, would you call yourself progressive? Yeah. Of course, okay. And so I wanted to ask you some questions about concerns that people have about some of the issues where you're not progressive, because I think a lot of people know the issues that you are progressive in, and if they don't, they should, like Medicare for all, and obviously getting out of the wars, which is really your go-to issue, and that has made you in a lot of ways famous in a good way, right? So some have concerns about your framing on the war on terror. And you've got some unfortunate fans there. Now, that's not your fault. There's nothing you could do about it. But Steve Bannon does like you. He said, or there's an anonymous source saying Bannon loves Tulsi Gabbard, loves her, wants to work with her on everything. She would fit perfectly inside the administration. She gets the foreign policy stuff and the Islamic terrorism stuff. I don't want you to respond to Steve Bannon's mind, because you can't control it, etc. But I think the reason he likes you is because I'm going to show a clip here and about your thoughts on Islamic extremism. Then I want you to react to your own thoughts and your own positions on it. Let's watch together.
So, on April 1st, Anna Kasparian posts a response to the critics and states that the Gabbard campaign did not want her to interview Tulsi. There is no written or video proof of this statement, save for a fact that she has another no-filter video with her talking about Tulsi Gabbard and her campaign.
There was a lot of anger regarding my segment last week on Democratic presidential candidate and Hawaii Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard. A number of her supporters accused me of smearing Gabbard after I brought up her voting record and past statements in support of the war on terror. So I want to make a few things clear. It is not my job to participate in political pageantry, even if I'm inclined to agree with most of the policy proposals of the politician in question. It's also not my job to smear candidates. For me, to smear someone, I would have to make things up about them. Considering the various examples I presented of Representative Gabbard sharing her views in her own words on cable news shows, it's pretty obvious that I haven't made anything up. It's normal and also responsible to look into someone's record as they're running for president and share thoughts, opinions, and concerns in response. I did that with Joe Biden on this show. I've done the same with Kamala Harris, Kristen Gillibrand, and other candidates on TYT's main show. Regardless of my critiques, I've never received the type of backlash I did when covering Gabbard. Not only do I stand by my reporting and analysis, I condemn any attempt to silence me when it comes to any politician. Although I would have loved to ask Gabbard about the issues raised in my previous episode of No Filter, I was informed by her camp that I would not be part of the interview she had with TYT last Friday. It was surprising, and a very surprising demand, considering no other candidate had done the same, regardless of how critical I've been about their positions in the past.
Now, from that video, Anna Kasparian makes a very bold statement indicating that Tulsi Gabbard, a sitting United States House representative and presidential candidate, basically went to the Young Turks, indicating that she will not be interviewed by Anna Kasparian, and thus basically commanding the people at TYT what they can and cannot say to her. However, if we look at previous interviews, such as the Joe Rogan podcast, Jordan Sheridan's interview, Michael Tracy's interview, the Niko House interview, the Kim Iversen interview, the Jimmy Dore interview, as well as interviews from corporate media such as the CNN Town Hall, the MSNBC Roundtable, her interview with Tucker Carlson, none of those situations similar to what happened at TYT that Anna Kasparian is making ever happened to those respective shows. We also reached out to 3 people who were a part of this process, and they have indicated that nothing like that happened to them when they were interviewing Tulsi Gabbard. It should be noted that from previous interviews that Cenk Uygur has done in the past, he has never let any one of his guests command or dictate him what they can and cannot be asked when they appear on his show and on his network. We are not taking any sides in this situation. However, Anna's statement does not match up to TYT's policy in regards when they interview guests, the 3 people that we reached out to, as well as the previous interviews from other independent media networks and from corporate media. However, if Anna Kasparian has hard evidence, or people from TYT Studios will step up to say that that's what happened when Tulsi Gabbard came to their studio, then this argument becomes something completely different and calls into question how Tulsi Gabbard and her campaign handles interviews. So, Anna Kasparian, if you have this kind of evidence, please reach out to Hardlens Media so that there's a solid conclusion to this series of events. We are on good terms with Niko House and the Young Turks. And so we want to call out for a moderated discussion in regards to everything that has happened since then about Tulsi Gabbard, this presidential election cycle, and really get to a final conclusion. We all want to build a better future, and a lot of people watch independent media because independent media is where people get the facts and are informed about the issues impacting them. It's distressing that we are attacking each other now this early on, and if we really want to build a better future, this senseless infighting has to stop. Look, this is a call out to all the fans of independent media and progressive media. Please tweet this out, share this so that we can end this, because it's senseless for us to be going at each other when in fact there are bigger issues to talk about. This is Kit with Hardlens Media. Peace, everyone. Please make sure you're subscribed, hit that ring bell notification, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and if you support independent media, we have a Patreon account. Your support is the main heart and backbone to everything that we do. Peace to all of you and to everyone who's watching. Let us all do what we can to build a better future, not only for ourselves, but for the next generation to follow.